Hi guys, welcome to this tutorial. I'm focusing today on Macbeth, looking at the 2017 AQA paper. Again, apologies in advance about any sound issues. I'm working from home due to the coronavirus issues that we're all experiencing. So, if you hear dogs barking, cats scratching, and just general chaos, then that's why. Okay, so in the last tutorials I did quite an in-depth look at planning for a question on the Macbeth marriage, and then looked at writing up a grade 9 sort of quality response. I'm really conscious that I'm a 38-year-old English teacher, and the way that I write isn't the way that you write, so I want to look at the 2017 paper, think about approaching that. And then a former student of mine really kindly has let me use her actual exam paper from 2017. We called her script back to have a look at. So that would be useful to show you her script. She got a grade 7, so you can see what that kind of looks like. Okay, so the 2017 paper, by the way, it's annotated because I'd got about 15 minutes into this when my laptop crashed, so rather than sort of redo the entire thing, I thought I'd sort of just pick up from where I'd left off. So the question in 2017 was a focus on ambition in Macbeth. It's kind of a good question really, but I think students came a little bit of a cropper with this because it was Lady Macbeth in the extract. They felt that they needed to purely talk about Lady Macbeth for the whole of their essay. If you get a theme style question like this, the presentation of ambition, it can be any character, and you can look at different characters. So you can look at Macbeth's ambition, Lady Macbeth's, even Banquo or Macduff. It's really kind of up to you to take this question in any direction that you're interested in. So looking, as always, at the information the exam board gives us, we know it's from Act 1, Scene 5, and as I said in the previous tutorial, anything from Act 1 is the introduction and establishment of something, be it plot, character, theme, setting, whatever. So we know that Shakespeare is going to be introducing and or establishing certain things. We see from the information that Lady Macbeth is speaking, we know from our knowledge of the play that this is actually delivering a soliloquy, and therefore she's alone on stage, showing not only that she's got importance, but also really drawing our attention to the things she's saying. They're going to have weight and significance. She's just read Macbeth's letter telling her about his meeting with the witches. Now we know about that prophetic greeting. We know that he wanted to tell his wife immediately about their prediction about Thane of Cawdor, which came true, and also their additional prediction or prophecy that he would become king. So moving on to the extract itself, let's have a look at this. She starts off by thinking about her husband's titles. He's Glamis, he's Cawdor, and he shall be what he's promised. Now, the thing I've drawn attention to here is the modal verb shalt be. This shows a real certainty. She is convinced he will become king. And that's a sort of strong and ambitious point. She does fear his nature, his personality is too full of the milk of human kindness. So there's a sense that she is so ambitious that she thinks that goodness is actually a negative attribute to have. She also goes on to say that he would be great. It's not that he's without ambition, but the illness that should attend it. So should is another modal verb like shalt. And it's interesting because from her perspective, she seems to think that ambition needs, or it should have actually, a killer instinct, some kind of hard edge to you that makes you prepared to do whatever it takes to get ahead. So really this is introducing and establishing Lady Macbeth's ambition as being fairly cutthroat. In the exam you're not expected to talk about everything. You could mention here about she thinks her husband's not sort of strong and ambitious enough, but I think some of the more important bits are here at the end of the extract, where she uses that imperative kind of hie thee hither that I may pour my spirits in thine ear. The hie thee hither bit is just hurry home so that I can pour my spirits in your ear. Now this metaphor of pouring the spirits, her spirit, her influence, she wants to kind of talk to him, persuade him. We would view it as manipulate him into the path that she feels he needs to follow. But equally, in terms of the context of pour my spirits in thine ear, it was a bit of a sort of fear and paranoia in the Jacobean era about being poisoned, and particularly the idea of whilst you're asleep, a murderer coming in and pouring poison into your ear. And obviously the Jacobeans had this real fear of dying in your sleep and not being able to make right with God. So this actually has some fairly evil, murderous connotations to it for that original audience. But anyway, she wants to chastise, meaning kind of to tell off, with the valour of her tongue, meaning her words and her speech, all that impedes thee from the golden round. So she's aware that he is going to put up barriers to becoming king, and her ambition is such that she is fully prepared to, do whatever it takes to speak to him. And all from the golden round, meaning the crown. This is meant to be a drawing of a crown. It's rubbish. And she talks about fate and metaphysical aid seems to have you crowned. Now, the metaphysical aid is referring actually to the witches. And interestingly, Lady Macbeth uses the word aid, which means assistance or help, which again would ring alarm bells for the original audience, because she's ultimately seeing something evil as a helpful influence. And such is her ambition that she's quite happy to consort with witches if needed. So there's plenty we can talk about there. Now, in the last tutorial, I sort of showed you a planning system for looking at the exposition, climax and denouement, or beginning, middle and end. And another approach is just to almost have a bit of a quote explosion, a memory dump, where you just take that idea of the ambition and just think about, right, how many quotes can I come up with? So that's what I did with this one. I thought about when he gets that original news and he talks about thinking really about the murder of Duncan, so this is Act 1, Scene 3, and he really is kind of contemplating regicide, and that sense of his ambition is immediate, isn't it? It's he clearly has a focus on what he wants to achieve. Then you've got in Act 1, Scene 4, when he actually meets back up with Duncan, and he says in those asides, but he talks about his black and deep desires. Moving on into Act 1, Scene 5, later in Act 1, Scene 5, remember, just because your extract is from there doesn't mean you can't use other parts, other quotes and things that are within Act 1, Scene 5. So I just thought about, within Lady Macbeth's soliloquy, the fatal entrance of Duncan being quite a good one. And equally, when she's talking about, when she's sort of calling on spirits, saying, unsex me here, fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty, her ambition is such that she's quite willing to be filled up with sort of malevolent, evil forces, if that's what it takes. Then you could think about in Act 1, Scene 7, within Macbeth's soliloquy, he says, I have no spur, only vaulting ambition. He acknowledges that the only reason to kill Duncan is, it is his desire to become king, his own selfish ambition. He knows Duncan's actually a really good king and has honoured him. So we could mention things like this. Equally, we could move on to Act 2, Scene 1, he's looking at the dagger, he's on his way to kill Duncan, and actually he says, come let me clutch thee. He wants to and is proactive in taking this, this, obviously it's a hallucination, but this dagger that guides him there. Again, his ambition is so strong that it leads him to commit regicide. And you could be thinking from later in the play, where when he talks to Lady Macbeth and he's planning to kill Banquo, he tells her that they are still young indeed. So this is a slightly different approach, where you just literally brain dump anything you can think about from that theme. To me, it's a bit more of a cluttered approach than the last one, but I appreciate that with the constraints of an exam, you might just be in kind of, right, get some ideas down as quick as possible, and then really it's a case of cracking on with your essay. So I think it's finding something that works for you. Okay, I wanted to show you then this response, which was, as I say, from a former student of mine. She got a grade 7. Actually, she got a higher grade overall, but if you look at the kind of marks she got, this would have been a high grade 7 for her Macbeth essay. So this is from the start of her essay. It talks about Shakespeare presents ambition in Act 1, Scene 5 by presenting Lady Macbeth to be an extremely ambitious woman, as she believes Macbeth is too full of the milk of human kindness. He is too compassionate and loving to be able to commit regicide, killing Duncan, as Duncan is Macbeth's comrade, ruler and friend. So there's a couple of different things in here. She immediately addresses the question. She's got some evidence in there, which she explains. She explains that quote by saying it shows that she thinks he's too compassionate. She also shows off knowledge of the rest of the play, and in mentioning regicide, she manages to get in some context there as well. Her ambition is conveyed through this quote as Shakespeare portrays Lady Macbeth to be concerned about her husband being able to follow the prophecy and become king. She wants him to be able to overcome his guilt and become royalty because she lusts for power. So the examiners have put AO1 task. This is the sense of it's really focused on the question. It hasn't just turned into a Lady Macbeth response. It is focusing on her ambition, and actually there's lots of explanation of this one quote. You'll notice she hasn't zoomed in. There isn't loads of terminology and technique. It's not a language question as such, although we do need terminology and techniques in there. But what's important is she's explained her ideas. This links to Act 2, Scene 3, where Lady Macbeth is presented to be chastising and berating Macbeth to hand her the daggers that he has used to murder King Duncan. Actually, she's got the wrong scene there. It's Act 2, Scene 2. So it's a good example of you don't have to be perfect, but she's in the right area, and the examiners realise you haven't got the play in front of you. These little sorts of mistakes will crop up. So what we're seeing here that we can give credit is we've got a link then to the rest of the play that he used to murder Duncan. Evidence for this is when Shakespeare uses I don't know what this bit says because the exam board put this over it, but I can see that the quote is infirm of purpose to convey the idea Macbeth is still weak-minded and cannot return to Duncan to plant the daggers on the chamberlains to frame them for the murder, and so Lady Macbeth must frame them instead. So there's a really good context, as I've said before. It doesn't have to be historical, social, people at the time believed. There's a context here in that this student shows an understanding of the whole play and can make and shows off that knowledge and understanding. And then we get here again the focus on the question. Ambition is shown here as Lady Macbeth is presented to be a ruthless and commanding woman who is willing to sacrifice her and Macbeth's lives for power, risking being caught with bloody hands that grasped the daggers that committed the deed. I really like this this part of it. What she's done here is she's put an embedded quote in, but really this is when your teachers maybe talk about evaluation, which is definitely a kind of grade 7 and above skill. This is a good example of this because she's weighing up in her own ways, in her own mind and in her own words, something about the nature of Lady Macbeth's ambition. And that she's making that point of her own, that she's willing to be caught with bloody hands. That's how ambitious she is. This is poignant. I don't know if poignant's the right evaluative word, but there's a degree there of evaluation. This is poignant because at the time of Shakespeare in the Jacobean era, people were living in a patriarchal society where women were never in charge and the men were brave and chivalrous. However, this juxtaposes with Shakespeare's presentation of Lady Macbeth, as she is filled with ambition and lust for the crown and power, more so than Macbeth even. So we've got here again some really nice context, but that context isn't just stuck in. The context is really linked with this idea of Shakespeare's purpose. What has he done as a writer? This could have been developed a bit more. I think she could have talked about why Shakespeare did this. So this student did probably, this was kind of one full side that I've just shown you, and I think that they did 3 like this, and that got a really good grade 7. So I think things to take away: there are quotes, there are links to the play, there's context, there's a really strong focus on the question, particularly explaining her own ideas. And so rather than me do my own this time, I just wanted to show you what a real student, someone of the same age as you, who went through this exam process, what they did, and how that achieved a grade 7. Okay, so thanks for looking at this, watching this 2017 tutorial. Maybe now have a go at the question, which I'll just put back on here for you to look at if you need it in front of you. All of these question papers are available on AQA's own website. Oh, I'm sorry, that's my dog barking. Sorry, guys.